Welcome everyone as you come in. I'm just going to wait a few minutes before officially beginning, waiting for our participants to join, but welcome as you come in. Okay, so we'll begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're coming to you live from Montreal. So it is good afternoon for us, and where you are, it might be something different, but welcome nonetheless. My name is Rosalia Felice, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the Virtual School of Continuing Studies at McGill University. So by now, you're used to having a lot of webinars and certainly things happening on Zoom. So you're very used to this virtual environment. So we welcome you here today. Today's topic is something very near and dear to my heart. As the Manager of Career Advising and Transition Services at the School of Continuing Studies, I'm all about careers and helping our students and the wider community with finding and negotiating their place in the workplace. And today's topic is negotiating for employment, jobs and job offers during a crisis. And it is my pleasure to welcome Fabiola Tassy. She is an instructor at the School of Continuing Studies where she teaches or instructs negotiating skills. And actually there's a 2-day seminar coming up on the 8th and the 9th of June from 1 to 4. So there are 2 afternoon seminars, and Fabiola will talk to us more about that. And she's actually a lawyer and senior legal counsel at Golder Associates. Now I'd ask you, if you have questions throughout, what Fabiola is gonna speak first, I'd ask that you save your questions and include them in the Q&A. You'll see a Q&A at the bottom of your screen, so you just click that, you put your questions there. Feel free to put your questions from the beginning, but know that Fabiola will answer them only at the end when she's finished her presentation. And without further ado, I now hand the control over to Fabiola. Welcome, Fabiola, and thank you.
Thank you, Rosalia. Good morning, good afternoon, maybe good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you for attending this webinar. The topic, as Rosalia mentioned, is about negotiating for employment. Unfortunately, this COVID-19 crisis, some of you may have lost your job as a result of this crisis, whether it's permanent on a permanent or a temporary basis, and you are now actively looking for a job. And hopefully you will get a job offer, and I will give you some tips on how to negotiate this job offer so that you can get the most efficient deal possible. The second scenario is that if you have not lost your job during this crisis, but because of the crisis, you feel that you deserve to, that your terms and conditions in your employment agreement need to be improved for multiple reasons, whether you have more work because you're working remotely and you feel that you're missing some of the tools to be efficient, etc. I will also give you some tools in order to approach your manager or human resources in order to negotiate terms and conditions with your existing employer. So I hope you are coping this COVID-19 crisis well under the circumstances. Things are improving and we are reopening a little bit if those of you are in Montreal. And you know, I hope this webinar will make a difference in your life, and I hope I can make a difference and improve your current situation. That is my goal. Trying to go to the next slide. Okay, so the next slide, I just wanted to introduce myself. Rosalia mentioned that I am a lawyer. I'm a member of the Quebec Bar, and I currently work for Golder Associates, which is a consulting engineering firm. Prior to that, I also worked for large companies such as Siemens, Pratt & Whitney, and Thomson Reuters. My expertise, of course, in addition to being a legal counsel, is to negotiate agreements and claims. I consider myself a strong negotiator nationally and internationally. And I have, of course, a law degree from University of Montreal, a BA from McGill, and a certificate in marketing from Concordia. And I've attended many negotiation training, corporate training at Pratt & Whitney, at Hartford, in Germany, as also when I was working at Siemens. And also I completed a certificate in negotiation at Yale University. So this is the agenda for today. We're going to look at 6 different topics. We're going to talk about preparation, HISC. We'll talk about that acronym, what it means and how important it is. The Ferrari Dilemma, BATNA, maybe some of you know what it means, but that's another acronym very common in negotiation. We'll look at a few case studies. We will look specifically at a salary negotiation, and we'll finalize with negotiations online. So this is a little quote. You'll see little quotes once in a while. You don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. This is more specifically applicable to those of you who have jobs and who want to change their conditions because you feel that you deserve it. You feel that you do a lot of work and you feel that that the employer, you know, they should give you more money or more this because you deserve it. Perhaps that's true, but it's more about how you will negotiate that, the fact that you deserve it, more about how you will influence them. So think about that, food for thought. We'll get into that later on. So let's talk about the first topic, preparation. So this is another quote. By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail, Benjamin Franklin. And that is applicable for everything in life, really, but we're talking about negotiation. Preparation is key. It is the first step in any negotiation. Before you will even have a discussion with the person giving you a job offer or your current manager, you need to prepare. You need to be thoroughly prepared. You need to do your research, whether it's depending on what you're asking. Say you're asking for a salary increase. You need to look at the industry. Glassdoor is one of them. Look at the market. Look at everything so you can later on justify why you're asking for this information. So this is very, very important. If you arrive unprepared, as Mr. Franklin mentioned, it is not, you will most likely fail and you will be frustrated. So it is very important to prepare. The more information you will gather, the more leverage you can have, and the better it is for you to have a successful negotiation. For example, personal information. For those of you who will have a job offer, it's a little bit more difficult to obtain personal information on the person because you don't work with them, but there are ways. For example, at the interview, you could try, I mean, without getting too personal, of course, but to get some personal information on the person you are being interviewed. So maybe try to know exactly, you know, what it is that they do or they like, other than the fact that they have this position at the company. You could try to see what their hobbies are. Also, look on their LinkedIn profile, look on their Facebook profile, Google them, look on Twitter, see what they do. Maybe they're involved in volunteer work. Maybe they're involved in their community. Find out some personal information about them, because maybe later on, and I'll tell you why, with the first letter, the H, you will have to use that to your advantage when you negotiate. If you have time, find a friend, someone you can trust, to role play that negotiation. Especially if you have someone, it's ideal, it's part of the preparation, and you can go back and forth, because the negotiation is not a monologue. It is a back and forth discussion. So if you have someone you can trust and you have the time, try to also role play. It is part of the preparation. So try to organize and accumulate this information that is necessary to eventually have an effective negotiation. So keep that in mind. Preparation, preparation, preparation. This will always be the key. Second topic is the acronym, HISC. So let's look at those 4 letters, HISC, Human Interest Solutions Criteria. This is an approach that is based on the book Getting to Yes by Roger Ferry. It is a book that is based on the concept of principled negotiation. As Rosalia mentioned, I also teach a negotiation workshop at McGill, and I really get into the details of those 4 letters, amongst other things, but we will briefly discuss them during the webinar. So let's start with the first letter, the letter H, human or people. So as you know, it's very difficult sometimes. It's very easy to forget that sometimes when we're in an interview or when we are discussing with our manager, those people are not just abstract representatives. These people are more than, I don't know, senior managers at this company. It's more than that. Those people are human beings like you, like me. So they have feelings, they have emotions, they have values, they have unique backgrounds, they have opinions, and also they will perceive certain things a certain way. And they are, as we are, unpredictable. Maybe you will say something to one person, the person will consider it as an insult, and for you, the exact same sentence means absolutely nothing to you. Again, the human being is a very complex creature. We know that because we are part of that creature. So consider that. For example, I mentioned earlier in your preparation to try to obtain personal information on the other person. So for example, if you know the person plays golf and is very good at golf, okay, maybe it doesn't apply now because people can start playing golf, but say you had the job offer during the time when golf was not permitted. Maybe that person was a little frustrated because, you know, they could not play golf at the time. So this could be something that you could mention at some point. For example, a human being that is working as a manager and that is close to retirement. That person will have maybe a different perception versus someone who is a manager and just started his or her career. So you will have the same job, but different perceptions because those people have different values, different backgrounds. So consider that when you're preparing. Consider your human being. Consider the fact that you have a human being in front of you that has their own perceptions, their own values, just like you do. Second letter, here are the interests. Now, the interests, there are fears, our wants, our needs, our desires. I'll give you an example. We gave an example earlier of a senior manager that is close to retirement. Say that person is retiring in 2 weeks or 2 months, let's say. Say you're interviewing for a job and that person is going to retire in 2 months. You've managed to obtain that information, whether it's at the interview or somewhere else. Fantastic. That person will have a different interest than a manager who just started their career. Maybe that manager who is going to retire in 2 months wants to fulfill that position that you've applied for quickly because they want to leave a legacy and they want to leave their team fulfilled, versus the manager who just started the career, who is nowhere near retirement. Well, you know what, if they fulfill it now, they fulfill it now. But if they fulfill it in 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, next year, it is what it is. They have alternatives. They're not in a rush. So this is relevant information for you. As well, you can differentiate between the company's interest and the human being interest. Again, consider the age. So for example, that manager who's close to retirement might say, I want to find this position and quickly because I'm going to retire. But then the company's interest, maybe for the company, it doesn't really matter whether they fulfill the position in a month or in a year. So you see, you have to consider those as well when you're preparing. We can talk a lot about interest, but keep in mind that it's very important to understand your interests when you're negotiating. What are your interests? What is it that you want? Of course, you want a job, yes. But what else? You know, what kind of job? What are you really interested in? And the ones who want to improve their current position in their current job, what is it that you're looking for exactly? What are your needs? For example, if you want, a typical request is, I want a salary increase of, I don't know, $10,000. Why do you need that? For example, someone might say, well, I just bought a new house, you know, and now that my kids are home, I have 2 teenage sons who eat like 5 people, and I need more money now because they're home. They used to play soccer. They used to go out. Now they're always there, and they're emptying my refrigerator, and it's costing me 5 times. So this is one interest that you have. This is one way to fight the gap of the $5,000. Another person could say, I just moved far away, and you know, it takes me an hour to get to work. It's very expensive. That's another interest. So maybe there's another way to meet that interest than just with the $5,000 or $10,000. Maybe there's something that the company can do. Maybe they can propose to split the amount of money of gas. Maybe they can, well, it's funny to say that now, but maybe 2 months ago, working from home was a luxury. But maybe 2 months ago, they could say, maybe you can work from home twice a week, et cetera, et cetera. So by asking, how can you know what those people's interests are? You need to ask questions, and we will go on that later. It's important to differentiate between positions and interests. Positions are important, of course. Positions are useful because you know what the person wants. I want a $5,000 increase. I want this price. I want a new car. I want this. That's fine. But then it's important to understand why that person wants what they want. What is behind this request really? What is really the source of this request? So it's very important not just to focus on position. The Classical way to negotiate is having a positional type of approach. I want this, well, no, I want that. And then you just argue and argue. That's one way to negotiate, but that's not a way to find an effective agreement. And when you negotiate on positions, somebody somewhere is going to feel frustrated. And it's very important when you're negotiating for your employment to think in the long term. Because when you negotiate with that person, I mean, of course, if it's your existing manager, whatever the result of that negotiation is, if you're very positional or if that person is very positional, well, even if there is a result at the end, and even if you get the $10,000 increase that you've asked at the end, probably the person you negotiated will feel that they will feel like a little negative or some kind of a resentment, because they will feel maybe that you were too positional and whatnot, and they will feel maybe that you ripped them off. And imagine having to work for a manager who feels that way with you. It's going to be very difficult for you as well. And it's the same when you're negotiating for a job offer. Even if you don't get the job at the end, for any reason, it's an opportunity for you to demonstrate that you can negotiate. Because if you can negotiate well for yourself, imagine what you can do for the company. So this is a great opportunity. How can you find out about your own interests and, of course, the other side's interests? It's important to know the other side's interests as well, not just yours. It's important to ask questions. We have to go back to when we were children and ask. Remember when we were kids, or those of you who have kids, they always ask why, how, this, when. It's really annoying, but it's very important that you have to go back to this little child of yourself and ask questions. When you ask questions, you receive, of course, information. When you ask questions, you do not speak. So you learn about the other person's objectives, opinions, differences of opinions. I mean, you could learn multiple things when you're not speaking than the person is answering your question. And of course, when you ask a question, you conduct a dialogue. So there's a back and forth discussion, which is key in a negotiation. And also, when you ask questions, you're sort of guiding the course of the conversation, because you are the one who's sort of controlling where you're going, which is good, because you know where you're going to go eventually, because you've prepared your negotiation. Open questions are very important when you want to have a discussion. So of course, those are those 5 words when you have to start an open question. Remember when we were a kid, when this, what that, where that, versus closed questions. Closed questions are also important, but closed questions have a different objective. Closed questions are asked when you want a decision to be made. You know, at what time will you arrive? Or, you know, can you do this? Then it's very clear you want a decision, and usually the answer will be yes or no. Open questions are key in order to determine your interests. So for example, you say, I want to ask my boss for 10% salary increase. Why? Because I need a new computer and I need a new chair because I've been working from home. So a chair, a computer, what else? You know, maybe you need to buy a bigger place because you need to have your own office. So those are all interests. So maybe there's a way for your company to meet those interests rather than to just give you the $10,000 increase. So we'll look at that later on as well. So think about that example. So it's important for you to ask yourself those questions. Why do I want this? Why do I want that? Because this way you will know, and it's part of your preparation as well. So when we look at somebody's interests and when we look at our own interests, think as if you were an investigator. Sherlock Holmes, I really like, or whatever. Think of an investigator that you like from television or whatnot. And it's like an investigator or a police officer who starts to investigate a crime scene. That person will start looking at the situation, analyzing the situation, what happened. And they will also start to ask questions about the people who were involved in the crime scene. That's what you're going to do. You're not just going to discuss what the counterparts want. So for example, if your manager says, I can't give you the $10,000, it's impossible. Ask why, you know, because the budget is frozen. Okay, so maybe there's another way to meet that 5,000. Maybe the budget of procurement is not frozen. So maybe they could purchase you a flat screen TV, rather than just give you the money. So you wouldn't buy it, the company would give it to you, and it would cost them $0 because they have the budget in procurement. Or maybe it's because, you know, you're spending too much time traveling and you don't want that. So maybe you could work from home, or maybe you could have a group that, well, maybe not with the COVID-19 crisis, but maybe you could have someone who lives nearby, drive you. Maybe there's a way to do this. Maybe they could provide you with a car. I mean, who knows? But if you don't ask why, you'll never know. So be the investigator and ask the question, ask why. Try to understand the other person's constraints. In the example I just gave, the person said, well, why can't you give me that increase? Because the budget is frozen, I cannot move. So try to maybe to mitigate that. Well, it's frozen now because of the crisis. Maybe it will be open in 6 months. Do you have a date when it's going to be open? So maybe I could have that money in 6 months. Maybe we could do this, or maybe I could have 1,000 in 6 months and another 1,000 next year. Try to understand their constraint and try to find solution that will alleviate those constraints, those concerns. Interpret also demands as opportunities. So when somebody asks you, I want the $5,000 increase, this is an opportunity for you to have a dialogue for that person and to understand what they want. As you know, employees now and employers, everybody is dealing with this crisis differently. We are all dealing with it differently, but it is difficult for everybody, whoever we are. So this is an opportunity for you to have a dialogue with the person. The person is asking you for something. Think at this as an opportunity rather than just, questions again, demands again. No, see this as an opportunity. There may be something there. There may be a way to find a win-win discussion here. Create common ground with the other side as well. You know, try to see how you can meet together in order to find a solution. Will be the best way to implement, and that's applicable for everything. The best way to implement something new is if you found a solution together, because you will both believe in it. It's like that for everything, for change, for everything. So try to find some kind of a common ground. And even if the deal doesn't work out, for example, this is especially applicable to those of you who want to negotiate different terms with your current employer. Say at the end it doesn't work out. Don't give up. Continue to investigate, even if it's lost. So for example, if they say the budget, there's nothing I can do. Everything is closed, everything is frozen, I cannot move. And then you say, well, look at procurement, maybe we can buy that. No, nothing. Fine. But continue to investigate on your own after that. It's part of the preparation. Even if the deal appears to be lost, there could be another opportunity here. Don't give up. So this was for the H. We're done with the H, human, remember. I, interests. S now, solutions. So after you've gathered the information on the H, your human being, you know information on your human being, their emotions, their values, their backgrounds, and you gathered information about your own interests and on the other side's interests, now it's time to discuss solutions. It's time to be creative. It's very important to try to leave everyone satisfied, to have a win-win agreement. Again, you don't want that manager, whether it's your future manager or whether it's your existing manager, to have a bittersweet feeling about you because they feel that you've ripped them off. You know, this is a long-term relationship. So you want everybody to be happy because you have to work together after that. So you want things to go well. Try to be creative. Try to invent options. As we mentioned before, someone says, I want a $5,000 increase. Why? Because I need to purchase a flat screen TV, because I need a new chair, because the chair I have is not comfortable, because I have 2 teenage sons who are eating like 2 elephants and they can't stop because they have no more activities and they're home all the time. They're not burning any calories. And be flexible. Try to give trade-offs. For example, if somebody is telling you, fine, you know, I will give you this, well, then maybe you could say, maybe in exchange, I could give you something else. Try, you know, I mean, don't give up everything, of course, but try to be flexible. It's part of the preparation that you did beforehand. You will be able to have trade-off and ideas. But once you have the H and the I, you will be able to have even more ideas for your solution. Creativity is very important, and have a discussion. You know, when you have it, don't come up with all of the solutions alone. Try to, you know, have the discussion and try to come up with the solutions together. Working together is key. C, last letter. So we had the H, we had the I, we had the S for solutions, and now the C for criteria. There are some things in negotiations, some aspects that you cannot change. For example, the law. You cannot have a deal and then ask them, you need to violate this law and whatnot. They cannot ask you to do that, and vice versa. So some things cannot be changed. For example, the market value. If you're looking into something and the market is completely crashed in a certain industry, some things cannot be changed. For now, anyway. I'm not saying it's never going to change because the law also changes, but some things cannot be changed. So consider that in your preparation. Scientific judgment, if that's applicable, consider that as well in your preparation as well. So consider that when you're looking at your solutions, things that cannot change at the moment. Maybe they will change later on. And be very careful when somebody tells you sometimes an example, it's company policy. That's fine, but look at the policy. Is there a way to change the policy? Is there a way to, maybe we can't change it today, but maybe we can change it in the long term. Maybe you can help to change the policy. Who knows, right? This is about discussing and finding a solution together. It's about being creative. Next topic, we will look at what we call the Ferrari Dilemma. So I will tell you a little story. Say your negotiation with your current employer or your new employer has turned out to be so successful that you're now the driver of a red two-seat Ferrari. Pretty nice, huh? So you're driving in your two-seat red Ferrari alone, and you're in the middle of nowhere. There is no Wi-Fi, there is no cell phone connection, nothing. The next cell phone connection or the next stop is 100 kilometers away. You're in a good mood, you're relaxed, everything is going well, you're just driving, it's a beautiful day, and you're driving. And all of a sudden, you see 3 people standing there on the side of the road. Those 3 people are the following. 1 is your boss. 2nd is an old lady. 3rd, think of a celebrity, an idol that you admire. Picture that person. That person is there. That person that you admire. It's a celebrity. What would you do? I'll give you maybe 10 seconds to think about it. Okay. So, how many of you made a choice? In a typical class of, say, 30 students, 29 out of 30 students chose the old lady. They chose the person that they would drive away with at the next stop. There's nothing wrong with that choice. But there's always one student out of those 30 that says, nah, for me, I wouldn't do that. I'm going to give the keys to my boss and to the old lady so they can drive away in my car, and I'm going to stay there and have a long, deep conversation with my idol. This is what we call, this type of thinking is what we call vertical thinking versus lateral thinking. It is a way of thinking that was developed by Dr. Edward de Bono in his book, Lateral Thinking. And there he discusses that we are all, in a way, you and I, vertical thinkers, meaning that we assume that we have constraints. When I told the story, I did not say, who would you choose? I did not say anything. I just gave you the facts and I said, what do you do? And 29 students out of 30 in a typical class would assume that they have to make a choice, versus that one student uses the lateral thinking approach and says, no, I'm going to use a different approach. So what Dr. de Bono says is that it's important for us not to be stuck with those constraints, not to have assume certain things that we can or cannot do. Have a lateral thinking approach. Think outside of the box. Think differently. And this is what's going to be important for us to do when we are in the S letter of the HISC, solutions part of the analysis. Have a lateral thinking approach and encourage the other side as well to have that lateral thinking, rather than, assume, well, the budget is closed, we have no budget, everything is frozen, there's a crisis going on. Don't you know there's a crisis? We can't do anything. Perhaps that's true, but there's got to be a way for this crisis to be an opportunity. And it's in your preparation that you will have that. So don't be stuck in assumptions and say, oh, they will never accept that. That has never been done in the past. It's up to you to find a way to be creative and to have a lateral thinking approach. So make sure when you do your preparation to have this lateral thinking approach. Dr. de Bono also wrote a book called The 6 Thinking Hats. Maybe some of you have already read it. It is an approach that was used by IBM, and as a result of using this approach developed by Dr. de Bono, the IBM increased the efficiency of their meetings by a significant amount. Food for thought, lateral thinking. Fourth topic, BATNA. Some of you may know what BATNA stands for. BATNA is best alternative to a negotiated agreement. This is in a situation where for some of you who are going to have a job offer, maybe it will not work out, this job offer, you don't know. And those of you who are going to negotiate with your existing employer to have better conditions, you don't know if it will work out. In your preparation, you need to plan and to predict what you're going to do if your negotiation fails. What is your plan B? What are you going to do? So for example, for those of you who want to negotiate with your existing employer, maybe you're thinking, okay, if it doesn't work out, I'm leaving, I'm quitting. I have enough money for a good 6 months or a year. I'm leaving the company for sure. I don't want to have anything to do with them. That's fine, but just make sure you have that plan, because that plan will give you confidence when you're negotiating. And the stronger the BATNA is, the more confidence you will have. Those of you who are going to negotiate for a job offer, same thing. For example, if the job offer doesn't work out, if you're negotiating and it doesn't work out after after you've received the offer, what is your plan B? Do you have absolutely no choice and you need a job and you need to take that job regardless? You need to have a plan B. It's very important to think about it, and that is part of the preparation. It's not just about your BATNA. You need to also, in your preparation, think of the other side's BATNA. Remember the interests? It's not about just our interests. We need to know what the other side's interests are as well. You need to know what the other side's walk-away position is. Remember the example of that manager who is close to retirement versus the manager who's in the middle or at the beginning of the career. Those two have different BATNAs. For example, the one who is close to retirement, we've decided that that person wants to finalize their team quickly because they want to leave a legacy. They want to finalize everything. So their walk-away position may be a bit weaker than the other one who is at the beginning of his or her career, because they think, if I meet the position, I meet it. If I don't, I still have time. It's okay. I can find a way. I can in-house. I can do other things. I have some budget. It's okay. So two different BATNAs. You need to understand what the other side's BATNA is as well. Do they, for example, those of you who have a job offer, do you know if they have a list of candidates also after you? Is there a number two, a second candidate? And that second candidate, is that person so close to you? You know, all this you will find out by preparing, and you also find out by asking those open questions. So it's very important to know the other side's BATNA. What is their walk-away position? This will give you confidence when you are negotiating as well. Let's look at a case study. This is about a salary negotiation. So it's important for both situations, whether you are negotiating with your existing employer to improve your conditions, or you're negotiating with your potential new employer for a job offer. Sometimes we wonder, do we have to name our number first? Of course, this is applicable. Well, when you have a job offer, most of the time they will give you the terms and conditions, you know, congratulations, you have this job offer, this is a salary. So it doesn't really apply, although you never know. But this is more applicable to those of you who want to negotiate something with your existing employer. Obviously, you will want to, for example, say, well, I want a $10,000 increase, or I want a certain number, two more weeks of vacation, whatever it is that you're asking. Name your number first. And if it is salary increase that you're asking, or an increase in vacation, or I don't know, you want to increase the number of days you spend at home, working from home, make sure that you've done your research so that you can rationalize this number. Make sure that you can explain where that number comes from. So if you're asking for a $10,000 increase, make sure you can say, because the industry is this, because of this and that. You know, that number needs to be justified. So for example, if you've done your research and you know that based on multiple sources, your position for your job description deserves $10,000 more, maybe you can name a ballpark figure of maybe 12 or 13,000, because eventually maybe you will find something in the middle. So make sure that you have done your research when you name your number first. If you cannot name a number, this is more applicable to those who have a job offer. Obviously, you cannot name a number first because they're giving you an offer with a salary. Make a counter offer. But again, this counter offer needs to be justified. It needs to be based on research. It cannot just come up like that. because you will lose credibility. You need to be able to justify it. And when you can justify a number, it will also give you confidence when you name that number. So confidence, and this is not about, you know, being arrogant when you name the number. It is just about you when not looking weak when you name the number. You need to know that this number is something that is fair because it is based on certain sources. So name it with confidence and give the rationale. Then most likely there will be a silence. Now be comfortable with that silence after you've made that, named that number, whether it's the number first or whether it's a counter offer. There will be a silence because that person is thinking, right? And there may be surprise. Remember the H, again, maybe that person will feel insulted, maybe they will feel surprised, who knows? But if you have a good rationale and a good research and a good basis, chances are they will not feel insulted, but there will be a silence. Be comfortable with that silence. Do not fill in that silence. The ball is on their court. It is up to them to respond and wait to see what they will see. And then you can have a back and forth discussion depending on what you discuss. Look at the interest, you'll look at the solutions. Maybe you'll make other concessions. And in the solutions that you will have discussed, that you will have prepared in your preparation, be flexible. Do not fall in love with your solutions. Be flexible. You know, be confident with those solutions, but be ready to change and, you know, to make changes because it will also depend on where the conversation is going. So be flexible, be creative, have the lateral thinking. And at the end, once you've agreed, once you've successfully completed your negotiations, make sure, and I cannot say this enough as a lawyer especially, make sure every single detail is in your employment agreement. Do not forget everything that you've asked for to the very detail, regardless of that detail is, even if you're there giving you free lunches, make sure it is in the employment agreement in writing before you sign it. Another example is a more specific example. It is a real case in the LAPA negotiation. It is about somebody, an assistant, who was asking for a salary increase. So they're asking for a raise and they asked plan blank for a 10% increase. Now, that 10% increase of salary increase was 5% higher than the company's average. So of course we had a problem. So how were they going to create a win-win solution? I'm not giving that many details. I give more details in my negotiation workshop, but just as a summary. So they explored possibilities. They looked at the H, the I, and the S. So they looked at the company hours, for example. They realized that the company hours were from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. And they realized that when the assistant was coming to work, she was coming in when there was the most traffic. Of course, this was before COVID-19 because there's little traffic now, but this was before COVID-19. So they thought, maybe we could reduce this amount of hours so she can spend more time at home doing what she likes in her leisure time. So they've decided that she will arrive a little later and leave a little earlier and then be able to have more free time. So this way she spends less time in traffic. They also looked at her job description. They saw that her job description was nice, but based on what she wanted, but when they asked, they looked at interests. Why do you want this? She wanted more interesting work. She gave a list of the things she wanted to do. So they decided to change the job description. So they gave her more interesting work, which was good for the company as well, because then they had someone who was engaged and who wanted to do more work. If you're giving more interesting work to someone, they're going to be engaged and productive. So this is a win-win. Then they looked at the money. They looked at the raise. So they said 10% is, you know, a bit much, but they made other concession with the traffic and the job description, and they decided to give her the 6% throughout the next 3 months. And then after the next 3 months, they were going to evaluate her and see, depending on her performance, if they were going to give her another 2%. So of course, all this was in writing in her employment agreement. So this is an example of a win-win arrangement that was done based on the H, the I, the S, and of course the C. I saw an article on the Black Swan group about how to win negotiations over Zoom. Zoom is one example, but you could of course negotiate, you know, Skype, phone, whatever. Chances are some of you now are working remotely, and most of you will, if you have to negotiate with an existing employer, it will most likely be online over Zoom rather than before. It was most of the time somebody calls you with a job offer. And for those of you, it's your current employer, you used to come to your manager's desk or office and have a face-to-face discussion. maybe this is not possible now. So if it's not possible for you, then this article is giving 3 tips on how to win negotiations over Zoom. Zoom is just one tool. So body language, nodding periodically is important. I mean, of course, if you don't agree, don't say yes. But if you do agree, it's important because they will see you on your screen. And so when you nod, it engages the person. It encourages them to have an open communication with you. If you have a negotiation with multiple people on Zoom, I don't know, 5, 6 people, it's possible. And you see that some people are maybe disengaged, or maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Try to test it and say a bad joke and see if somebody reacts. So this will give you some information on the H as well. If the person's bored, what is the role of this person? Maybe they're just there because they're learning. What is it exactly? But saying a bad joke, if they react, it will give you an information on what that person's role is. So you can identify off-target people and on-target people with the bad joke. That can give you some information. Second tip is take notes. I mean, of course, if you're on Zoom, you can maybe hear, to make sure that you're seen. So for example, you could even say it at the beginning, do you mind if I take notes? So they see your pen, and then you have your pen here, and then you could be like this. Whenever somebody is speaking, and I'm sure you feel the same way, and that other person is taking notes, you feel that what you're saying is important. You feel validated. You feel good. You feel wonderful. So it's important for you to also take notes. So that way they will feel wonderful, right? It's also good for you because you absorb the information better. You will take notes. Of course, taking notes during an interview is very important. And it also gives you a chance to think because you're writing things down. It gives you a chance to think on what you want to say, your preparation, etc. It can also help you have a better deal and avoid having a bad deal because you're thinking and you're taking notes, you're gathering the information. Third is, if possible, try to stand up if you can. I know I'm sitting down, but I would recommend that if you can, stand up while you're doing your negotiation online. First of all, it is proven that movement helps your thought process. You think differently and you're more energized. A lot of articles have been written when people have meetings, team meetings, they say, let's take a walk, whether it's outside or in the office, and apparently there are more ideas, people feel energized. So they will see you standing up. Make sure they can see you're standing up, and they will see that you are going to share that increased energy, and that energy will be contagious. And if they see you energized, they may feel energized also towards you, and this will create a better relationship, which is good for the negotiation. Remember the H. If that person is energized, they will feel positive about you and their relationship with you, which is great. This is an article when I gave a webinar maybe 3 weeks ago about how to negotiate with people you're quarantined with. I also mentioned this article. I will go quickly. It's about Amy Gallo. There's a TED Talk. She gives 3 steps to prepare for difficult conversation. I thought it was relevant to leave it there because some of you who want to negotiate terms and conditions with your existing employer, you may have a difficult conversation because maybe that manager will not be expecting you to ask for a negotiation. Maybe they have no idea, no clue that this is coming. And they may take it badly. They may feel offended by the fact that you're asking this. They may, remember the H, they may have this perception that, how dare you? We are in a crisis. People are dying and you're asking me for more money. So be prepared for a difficult conversation. So Amy Gallo gives 3 tips in her TED Talk. First, look at the other's perspective. Remember the H, motivation. What is motivating them to do or to act a certain way? What is their behavior? And, think, well, maybe that person did not have any sleep. Maybe that person's confinement is not going well. Maybe this, maybe that. So look at the other person's perspective rather than judging them. Second is think before. That's part of the preparation, of course. Before you even have the discussion, ask yourself, what is it that you want from this conversation? What is your goal? What are your interests? What is it that you want? Do you want to test to see if you can get those better conditions? And then if you don't, you're going to leave. If that's the case, fine. But make sure you know what you want from this conversation when you have a difficult conversation before you even get in. And ask yourself, what are we actually disagreeing about? Sometimes when you have difficult conversation, it goes off track. because you're dealing with human beings, with emotions. And sometimes people, they're thinking about something else. And unfortunately, you happen to be there. So they're taking it out on you. It's unfortunate, but it happens to everyone. I'm sure it happened to you that you're taking it out on someone else because something else happened. So focus on what are we actually disagreeing about? Because sometimes it may be something completely off topic. That's it for the TED Talk. Those are the 3 tips. And remember that in conflicts, when there is a winner, nobody has won. If you think that you have won in a conflict, I'm not talking about a soccer game or a football game. I'm talking about conflicts with human beings. That other person who you think have lost will probably feel bad. And usually nobody has won if somebody thinks that they won something. And remember, that's another quote, success in a negotiation is measured by the extent to which one's vital interests, yours and the others, are met and concerns are alleviated. Remember, we talked about that, the I. It's very important to discuss and to pay attention to those interests and concerns when you're negotiating. This will determine whether that negotiation is successful when you're done. Did you consider the other party's interests? Were your interests met, but not just yours? It's not about winning. Were the other person's success and concerns alleviated as well? That's a successful negotiation. And finally, those takeaways. Prepare, prepare, prepare. That is the key. Prepare also to answer the question, what is the rationale behind, for example, a $5,000 increase? Be prepared to give that response. And why is having a new car or having working from home twice a week so important to you? Be prepared to answer that question. Maybe you're going to ask it as well. Sometimes when they give constraints, you could ask, well, what is the rationale behind such and such? Why is such and such so important to you? Remember those 4 letters: human, interest, solutions, criteria. Consider that in your preparation and be flexible throughout the negotiation with those 4 letters because they may change. Ask questions to make sure that you're going to know what the other side's interests are, what their concerns are. Have a strong BATNA. Know your other side's BATNA as well. That's key. And think long term. This is not when, we're not traveling. Well, for now, we're not traveling. But say you're traveling somewhere far on the other side of the world and you're in a bazaar and you're negotiating to buy a pair of shoes that you're probably going to wear once. Probably never going to see that person again. I think it's a good idea to use the HISC, but you're probably never going to see that person again. This situation we're discussing with, negotiating for a job offer, negotiating with your existing employer, you will see those people again. It is a long-term opportunity. So think opportunity, even if you don't have the job offer. Who knows? Maybe they don't give it to you today. Maybe you will give them a good impression. Maybe that person that they select will not be good enough, and maybe they'll call you in 3 months. Or maybe they'll give you references. Maybe, you never know. So think long-term when you're negotiating. So always remain professional, remain candid, think of the H, think of your I. That's very important in those type of negotiations. So that's it. I think Rosalia, we could take, we have some time for questions.
Absolutely, thank you. That was such a wealth of information on so many levels, especially now, because I think a lot of people don't know how to negotiate during this time. And actually our first question is about that. The question is it a good moment to switch jobs right now under current circumstances when things are so unstable?
That's a good question. I think this is part of your preparation. You need to ask yourself, why is it that I want to switch job? The current job that I have, what are the pros and cons of that job? Because this crisis is unstable, yes, but it depends on which industry you are. For example, if you're in the health industry, there are multiple opportunities. I don't know if you listen to the press conferences of our premier or of everywhere, but there are opportunities in the health industry. So somebody who wanted to switch from a certain area that is closed, for example, a hairdresser who wanted to go into and become a nurse, I think this is a wonderful opportunity as well. So what I would do is it depends on your industry. And number 2, I would prepare and ask myself, why do I want to switch jobs? What kind of industry? Some industries are very volatile. Aerospace industry, for example, you see Bombardier and you see all that, they're doing furloughs. It depends on the position. It depends on what, but that's part of your preparation. There is no yes or no answer. It depends on your industry and it depends on why you want to switch, on your interest and on your BATNA. If you stay in your job, what is your plan B? If you leave and it doesn't work out, what is your plan B? Think of your BATNA. Remember, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Thank you. We have another question. How can I make sure that I am paid fairly compared to other team members and market standards?
Research, preparation. There are many ways you can find out. There's Glassdoor, that's one of them. Look at your industry and the positions that you're in. There are many forums you can join and ask questions. Now, if you can know your teammates, of course it's confidential unless your teammates tell you, but then do you really know if they told you the real information? That's something very complex because it's confidential information, but you will find out in your research. When you look, there are many, many websites that are available, and maybe you can find out on the social media. Many websites are available where you can find out what the market is offering.
Great, thank you. And certainly one takeaway for me, and something that we don't often consider, is the other person in negotiations. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And for when we meet students, that's one of the things, you know, obviously when you're looking for work, you're thinking of yourself and you're thinking of what you need from that, but it's important obviously to consider the other party. So thank you for that. I invite you to ask more questions under the Q&A. You just click that on the bottom of your screen. But meantime, I have a question for you. So a lot has been written and a lot has been said about the differences in genders when negotiating. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think you see a lot of articles. I've read a lot of articles about women who feel that they negotiate less than men. Personally, I think what you need to do is focus on the H, the I, the S, and the C, and to prepare. So are women more prepared than men? I mean, I really don't know. I don't really have any data on that, and there are many different opinions on that. But I would think, you know, if you're a woman in an industry or a man in an industry, you know, focus on the H. If you think that that person has some biases, because remember the H, some people have values, have backgrounds, have opinions. If you feel that you're going to be discriminated because of your gender, focus on the H and see if there's an opportunity there, because it's very important to focus on the H. Your question is very much on the H, the human being with backgrounds and et cetera, et cetera. So I would try to look for an opportunity there.
Thank you. And I just wanted to comment too on one thing. It's funny because when I'm in a hiring situation and I know I'm going to meet a potential candidate, I'm always shocked when I see they haven't looked at my LinkedIn profile. So it's funny that you said research them as well, because I'm always shocked, like, wow, the person didn't go look at my LinkedIn. And I was talking about that with a student. They said, oh, I would think they would think I was stalking them. So I'm glad you brought it up on, yeah, absolutely, right? It's important to know who's going to be doing the negotiating for you. We have another question. During an interview, is it a good idea to ask the employer what the company would do to protect employees during crisis times? Very timely question. I'm thinking to give the employer a sense of security and include that in writing on the job offer.
Sure. I mean, I think it's a good idea. It depends on the industry, of course. Make sure that when it's written on the job offer, because we don't know what's going to happen with this crisis. Something that we know is we don't know. This virus is something that is unknown, and nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows when a vaccine will be available. I think it's a good idea to put it in writing, but I would be very careful with how you write it. For example, I mean, I think you would probably, one thing I would do is the government has developed many tools in order to guide companies to implement health and safety measures. So I would probably, one thing I would do is probably use that reference depending on where you're located. If you're in Quebec, the Quebec government has developed, I think, the CNESST, I don't remember. So it's measures that employers, companies need to implement. So I would probably refer that, because that policy may change, but it's changed by the government. So it's not that bad. Now, if you want more protection than what the government is giving you, for example, you want the company to provide you with masks. For example, masks are not mandatory. They're strongly recommended, and you're afraid because you're going to take the public transportation and you want a mask, but then you don't want to pay for it. You want your company, you know, the company should give me a mask. We'll have this written down in your contract that you will be provided with a certain amount of masks per month, per week. I don't know. It depends, because it depends I don't know how often you have to wash them, but prepare, you know, verify your information on the mask and also the type of mask that's available. And maybe you can give it an end date until it's no longer required or recommended, because for now it's recommended, but until it's no longer recommended either by the World Health Organization or the government. I mean, you can be as creative as you'd like. It's just one example, but you can be as creative as you'd like in a contract.
It's interesting too, because we tell people who are looking for work right now, one thing to know about a company, and you see how they're acting during the crisis. You know, what are they telling their employees? What are they posting online? So this is kind of similar, I think, having somebody put that into their, actually making a point of making those statements is interesting from an employee's perspective.
Yes, and it gives you information on how they value their employees as well.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We have another question.
Yes.
What are the ethical aspects of the negotiation? Oh, that's a loaded question, but I'll have you.
I deal with ethics in negotiation in my negotiation workshop, so it's a topic on itself. I mean, to summarize, I would say usually lying is not a good idea, and also if you look at certain behaviors, depending on the country where you are, certain things are accepted or not. But as a summary, I would say really look at the, just make sure you're not misleading people and that you're not lying. To summarize, I would focus on that. But ethics is a bigger aspect on its own.
Okay, I'm sure. Thank you. And one more question, and then if you can, after this question, maybe close to talk about your course, which is coming up in June on the June 8th and 9th. So here's our last question.
Yeah.
How to make a written agreement valued when the time to ask for salary augmentation is on the table? And if they put all kinds of excuses, could you give advice on how to get what we are asking? So I think the person's asking if the employer is making excuses for why they can't have, well, this person, I use excuses of the way this person typed it, for why you cannot have an increase. What should you do?
Well, open questions. You can ask why. I think it's a question. You need to go back to when you were a child and ask, why is it that it is not possible for employees to ask for a salary increase? They will answer you, I don't know, it's company policy. Now, maybe you can look further in this policy, and maybe there's another way to meet the salary. And you need to ask yourself, why is it that you want the salary increase? What is it that you're going to do with this money? Is it about transportation? Maybe there's a way to meet you halfway, because sometimes companies have a budget, a financial spreadsheet, a financial balance sheet. They have no more money in salaries, but they have money elsewhere. They have money in procurement. They have money in transportation. They have so many sections, right? So maybe there's a way to do it elsewhere. Or maybe, as the example with the assistant asking for a raise, maybe they cannot give it to you today, because for now, of course, companies giving salary increases, unless you're in the health industry, it may be a little bit difficult, but maybe there's something else you can ask, depending on why you're asking yourself for the salary increase. Do you need a new flat screen TV because you're working from home? Do you need a new chair because you're working from home? What is it that you need? What are your needs, your wants behind your salary increase? And on their side, why is it that they cannot give you a salary increase? What is it that they can give you? Where's the flexibility?
And on that note, how do you know when you've reached the end, when you really should stop pushing? I know that must be a hard question to answer, but when you're in negotiations and you really feel like you're not sure whether to keep pushing or not, do you have any advice for what to give on when to think maybe I should just cut my losses or stop here?
Sure. Number one, it depends on how the discussion took place. Remember, we looked at a slide about difficult conversation. Maybe we're at a stage where we're having a difficult conversation and we're having a conflict. This is not the good side. So we look at the age and consider the other person, acknowledge the other person's feeling, think of what we're disagreeing about, look at those 3 steps. And it depends, are we having a positional type of discussion? Because in theory, if you're looking at the H, the I, we wouldn't be pushing really if we're really applying those two principles. If you are prepared and you have really thought of the age, for example, if you think the person is tired because you've looked at the age and you know that they need to yes, daycares are open. So they need to pick up their kids in 5 minutes. So they want to rush this. Maybe sometimes it's good to take breaks. Breaks are important. Sometimes when you're in a dead end in a negotiation, sometimes taking a break is a good thing. So maybe you can take a break and come back the next day. And look at the emotions, always focus on the H, the H, the H. Pushing and being positional is good in certain circumstances, but I would not recommend it in this situation, because after that you will reach an agreement and you will have a winner and a loser. And this is always unfortunate in those type of situations, because eventually you will have someone you have to work with who will resent you because they feel that they were cheated.
Yeah, so you want to save that relationship, especially knowing you're going to be working with them. So thank you, Fabiola. And I know there are questions that are yet to be unanswered. I apologize, but we have run out of time. It is actually 1 minute to 1 o'clock. So I'm just going to ask Fabiola to talk about the upcoming workshops on June 8th and 9th to end. And I thank all of you for joining us at the Virtual School of Continuing Studies. I've certainly learned a lot, and I will never forget the H, or that acronym. Actually, this is wonderful, really tangible things to take away. And I really thank you on behalf of the School of Continuing Studies. So go ahead and tell us about your workshop.
Thank you, Rosalia. So quickly, more details on the site of the McGill University, but the course is it's on a 2-day in an afternoon, and we look in the details, of course, in the HINC. You will have exercises as well where you can have discussions, and we look at ethics in a negotiation. We also look at employment agreement, on what to look for when we're negotiating a contract, et cetera. And what's interesting, it's more that you have role plays and you have the possibility to interact and to test your negotiation skills as well. And we look at a way to find an effective negotiation. And there are many sources that I use, Getting to Yes, Harvard Business Review, Yale University, et cetera.
Excellent. That sounds fantastic, and certainly timely and useful for both people looking for work and who are employed and looking to negotiate either a salary increase or something else. So once again, thank you so much, Fabiola, Tassy. We really appreciate it. Thanks all of you for tuning in. And hopefully I'll see you at Fabiola's course, because I will definitely be there. So thanks so much.
You're welcome. Good luck, everyone. Stay safe. Thank you, Rosalia.
Thank you.
Bye.